We are nothing if not flexible, right? I have a tremendous privilege today, a real joy, to introduce one of our own, Ernie Lee. Ernie, who teaches, what is that International
Baccalaureate, right.
International Baccalaureate course at Windsor Forest High School in an exceptional manner. He won the school Teacher of the Year. Then he won the Savannah Chatham Teacher of the Year. And now he is the 2016 Georgia State Teacher of the Year. But he still reminds me of Atticus Finch in his seersucker suit.
You know, everybody likes to be recognized. That's one reason I stand at my classroom door and greet each of my students by name. I acknowledge their presence and I welcome them into my classroom. And I tell them that they're glad that they're here. And I'm glad that they're in my class. I often say, you know, I can't be a teacher unless I have students. And I think they get it. In a way, when I stand at my door, I am taking their temperature to see how they are or how they will be during our time together. It's actually a survival skill for me. Right away, I can tell who is having a bad day and who needs some distance. I can usually tell who is and who is not ready for class, who has and who does not have their homework. But unfortunately, sometimes my good morning and friendly face may be the only friendly face a student sees all day. But that's how I start each of my classes. This morning, I want to tell you about two of my former students. The first student witnessed the murder of his mother at the hands of his father, and this happened when he was 4 years old. I met him 10 years later when he was 14 and entering in the 9th grade. He was in my first homeroom class, and it was the first year of being a regular teacher. The student had panic attacks and had few friends. He was very unsure of himself. During this freshman year, his grandmother, who had raised him, unexpectedly died, and the panic attacks increased. This student was nervous and full of self-doubt. The student would have meltdowns, and I would get the call. But you know, I learned to go in and to sit quietly beside the student. I would just say, "It's Mr. Lee, and I'm here." And I would sit in silence. I didn't expect anything from him, or nor did I make any demands. After a few minutes, I would observe, to no one in particular, that the room was kind of warm. You see, the student had pulled his jacket over his head to cover his face. He wanted to block out the world. I would suggest that he might be more comfortable if he unzipped his jacket just to get some fresh air. But I said it was up to him. And I would continue to sit in silence. In a few minutes, he would pull down the zipper. In 10 minutes or so, I would have the jacket off and the student talking. And then 10 minutes more, I'd have the student back in the class. It's all about relationship. It takes time and effort to develop relationships. And I learned to make no demands of someone who is in crisis. I've been in crisis and I know how it felt. You see, it's all about the relationship. In the short time that I've been a teacher, I've found that students are a lot like icebergs. If you know anything about an iceberg, you know that just a tiny portion sticks out of the water. Like a student, this is what you see at first, just a tiny portion of the student's true self. But you know, it may be a persona that the student wants you to see to keep you at a distance. And students will do things to keep adults at a distance, trust me. The second student, well, when he came to class, he always came late. And just so you know, a late arrival always disrupts the class if you let it, and I let it disrupt my class. For the first 2 weeks, we fought every day until I realized this wasn't working. Yeah, it only took me 2 weeks to figure that out. And I know that that student picked up on my attitude, and he could tell I didn't like him. And you know, he was right. He fed into it, and I allowed it, and I fed into it. I would have this tug of war asking him why he was late, why he had no supplies, why he never had a pencil or a pen, his papers or a book. And I pointed this out every time he was late, but he would have an excuse. Well, one day he got to class just after the bell sounded, and I was still in the hallway. You know what? I gave him a high five and thanked him for being on time. And I made a big deal about it. And I was smiling. Now, I knew he was late. He knew he was late. But we both ignored that fact. Rather than point out he had no supplies, I asked him, hey, do you need a paper, some paper or a pencil or a pen? And he said he did. And I gave him the supplies and welcomed him into my class. The next day, he was on time. And I made a big deal about it again. I said, man, 2 days in a row, another high five. And all the time I was smiling. Now, this time, rather than asking him if he needed supplies, I could tell by looking he didn't have anything with him. And this time I had all the supplies ready in a neat pile and just handed them to him as he walked into class. Well, that week we had a notebook check coming up, and a notebook check is big points. And so the day of the check, I pulled him aside and said, hey, do you need a notebook? He said, yeah, he would get one. And I said, no. I said, I happen to have one, an extra one. Would you like it? And he looked at me and said, yes. And so I gave him the notebook. He got points for having a notebook. Now, we both knew he shouldn't have gotten points for a notebook. But you know, we both ignored that fact, and he got credit for the notebook check. We were building a relationship. You see, the only thing that I could change in this situation was my attitude towards that student. And the student immediately sensed that I was different. And something else changed. He began to come to class every day. Now, he didn't come to school every day, mostly due to being suspended. But when he was in school, he came to my class. Well, when he wasn't in in-school suspension. It's a fact, and any teachers know this. Troubled students never miss a day of school. Now, he still walked the halls during all of his other classes. But you know what? He always came to my class. And mostly he came on time. I won't say every day, but mostly he did. Rather than fight him, I began to ask him questions about what he liked to do after school. I was building a relationship with him. He actually turned in some good work. Well, sometimes. But I could tell he was smart. Now, the one thing I haven't told you is this. He had an electronic monitoring bracelet on his ankle. If you don't know about these bracelets, they're used to track people who are in trouble with the law. Now, he could go to school and back home, but nowhere else. And once a week, one of the school secretaries would call me to have him come to the office to change the batteries in his monitor. They always called my class because they knew that he would be there, and he was. Well, actually, he did some good work. Yeah, sometimes he would copy another student's paper, but I would catch him, and I would pull him up, and I would be smiling when I would say, look, you are too smart to copy somebody else's work. And I would tell him, look, show me how smart you are. And he would take on the challenge. And he actually did some good work. To have peace in this one government class, I had to stop fighting this student. I had to meet him where he was and go from there. Yes, on the days he was out of class, the class did run smoother. When I saw that big toothy grin coming down the hallway, my heart would sink. I thought, oh, he's here. But that soon changed too. I changed my attitude, and he could tell that I accepted him for who he was, where he was, and we were able to do some schoolwork together. One day I asked what he planned to do after graduation. Now, I ask all of my students this sometime during the semester, and he was surprised that I asked him. He said he didn't know. And I told him I wanted to see him walk across the stage at graduation, and I would be his biggest cheering section. Well, his face and his voice told me he thought I was lying. But I looked him square in the eye, and I said, no, I am very serious about this. This is why I chose to teach, and this is why I became a teacher. My job is to be your teacher and to help you pass this class and to help you do whatever it takes for you to graduate. Your job is to pass my class and to graduate. He was amazed. I don't think anybody had ever asked him if he was going to graduate. He was still marked as a ninth grader, even though he had been in school for 4 years. We have a lot of students like that. But I went on to say, this is why I give you paper and pencils. This is why I offer to work with you before and after school. Look, I've had a good life. I want you to have a good life. To do this, you need to graduate and go to college, technical school, or to get a good job. Now, you got to know, I say this a lot in my classes. I give a similar speech to all of my students at one time or another, but I also add in, I want them to get a good job and make a lot of money. And I also want them to pay a lot of taxes. Well, my students look at me like I'm crazy. And I say, no, listen to me. I want you to pay a lot of taxes so your taxes can pay my Social Security to keep me in my old age. I guess I'm pretty selfish. Of course, I'm smiling the entire time, and my students just laugh. Life lesson, say it with humor if at all possible. Now, I will tell you this, in the last year, I've said this so many times that every time I go into my diatribe as to why I teach, one group of 11th graders would stop me and say, we know, Mr. Lee, to get us to pay taxes to keep you in your old age. They got it. Life lesson, it's all about relationship. Now back to the second student. For 6 weeks, he chose to come to my class every day. Well, every day he wasn't suspended. But one day, he didn't come to class, which was really unusual. I checked the suspension list. He wasn't there. And I began to ask around, and I made a couple of phone calls. Well, I found that he had gone off campus and had robbed someone, and he was out of school and he was out of the system. There's no way to track him, no way to find out what happened to him. His records were gone. Well, like I said before, students are a lot like icebergs. The danger with icebergs and with students, if you don't stop and take a look below the waterline, there's going to be some irreparable damage. Like an iceberg, students, all students, have a lot of depth that does not always show. You have to stop and look below the waterline. Life lesson, stop and look below the waterline. Before I started teaching, I can't tell you how many times I've seen a group of young men on the street corner at the mall looking very menacing and dangerous. Or the times I've been waited on in a fast food restaurant by a snarly and rude teenager. But now I have a deeper understanding of those kids. She may be working to help support her family when she should be home studying for a test. Or you know what, and I've seen this a lot of times, she may have a baby of her own at home, and she's working to pay for diapers and formula or to help pay the rent. The menacing young boys, well, you know what? They're really just trying to fit in, and they're mostly unsure of life. They've adopted a look this week, and most likely it's going to change next week. A smile and a greeting can go a very long way. Sometimes students do things just to put adults off. Most of the time, they're just unsure of themselves and they're just trying to fit in. They're full of doubt and insecurities. You know, after all, they're still children. One day I walked up to a student with purple spiked hair and body piercings. He wore a black leather jacket with chains, and I told him, "Man, I like your look." But then I apologized real quickly, saying, "Oh, I hope I didn't offend him." I asked, "Is it bad for a teacher to say that I like his look?" Well, the student broke out into a wide grin and said, "Man, it feels even cooler to have an adult tell him that, much less a teacher." And he gave me a high five. Well, we had a great conversation. And he told me how he got his hair that particular shade of purple and what it took to make it stand up. This menacing-looking person turned out to be a really sweet kid. Life lesson: don't judge a book by its cover. To decide if I wanted to be a teacher, I took a job as a substitute teacher, and someone told me if I could be a substitute and survive, I could teach. And it was good advice. Now, I got to ask you, do you remember what it was like in school when you had a substitute teacher? Things haven't changed. They haven't changed at all. But I learned a great deal, and I survived to go on to be a real teacher, as my students say. I want to tell you a quick story. I was substituting that year in an early childhood education class of 10th graders, 10th grade girls. And I knew nothing about the subject, and I was really babysitting. I hate to say that, but that's what I was doing. The students were on task. They were talking very loud, but they were on task. And I thought, okay, things are going well. And I heard a student call my name. Mr. Lee, pay attention to me. And I kind of stopped and looked up. And the student told me she had written a rap song about me. And she wanted me to hear it. And so I smiled and, okay, hush everybody, I want to hear this. And the student started into a really colorful and lively rap about me being a substitute teacher. She mentioned my dark hair and glasses and spoke about my bow tie. It was really clever. I applauded the student and thanked her and asked the class to applaud her too. Success. Now, then I told them, okay guys, you've all got to get back to work, or I am going to get in trouble if you don't finish your work. And you know what? They did. They were still loud, but they got all their work done. Now, flash forward 2 weeks later. Same school, different class, 10th grade English class. The class is out of control. I can't even call roll. I don't know who's in the class at all. And it is so loud, I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to be fired. This is crazy. And then out of the back of the room came a booming voice that said, "Y'all sit down and shut up. Mr. Lee is trying to talk, and I want to hear what he has to say." The room instantly got silent, and everybody sat down. Thank you. The voice went on to say, "Go ahead, Mr. Lee, I got your back." It was the young lady who rapped the song about me. I gave her some positive attention, and she remembered me, and she helped me out. Life lesson, it's all about the relationship. Be nice to people, and it will come back to you. Now, people have asked me, how do you know to do this? And I don't know. I truly just follow my instinct. I speak to students in the hallway or on the bus ramp, and the most dangerous and roughest looking kids are usually the ones who respond back to me when I say good morning. And then I stop and ask them about their day and how they're doing, or ask them about their grades if I know the student. I have to take time to stop and ask, and then be willing to stop and listen. When I take the time to actually stop and listen, their whole demeanor changes. Their whole demeanor changes. This is how I begin to build relationships with my students. Now, I will tell you this, teachers are required to stand in the hallway between classes to monitor behavior, but you know what? I greet all the kids that walk by my door. Even if they're not in my class, I'll say good morning, good afternoon. I'll comment if they're wearing a new jacket or if they have done something special to their hair. Teenagers are always doing something special to their hair. I will comment if they look tired or sleepy, and I'll ask, did you not get enough sleep? Just an acknowledgement of them as people brings a smile to their face. People like to be recognized. Now, both the Old Testament reading and the Gospel reading today, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, are all about being in relationship. From the book of Deuteronomy, it says, love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your strength. Well, if you ever go to the home of a Jew, most likely you will see a mezuzah. And a mezuzah, I'm told, is the Hebrew word for doorpost. A mezuzah contains a small parchment inscribed with the very passage that we read from Deuteronomy today. The parchment is rolled up and placed in a decorative case and attached to the doorpost in a Jewish home. It reminds one he or she is in relationship with God. And a devout Jew will touch the scroll as he or she enters and exits their residence. It's a visual and outward sign of devotion, and it reminds one of their relationship with God. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your strength. Today's passage from the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus is referring to this same chapter in Deuteronomy. Jesus says, you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. For me, this sums up what it means to be in relationship. And I've made this as one of my best practices for teaching. I have to be in relationship with God before I can be in relationship with another. And when I am in relationship with another, I have to love that person as I find them. I don't make demands or tell the person to change before I give my love. Did Jesus tell people to stop sinning before he would associate with them? No. For me, teaching is about relationships. The older I get and the more I study the Gospels, the more I see that Jesus was also all about relationships. When students are horsing around or fighting in my classroom, I say, remember the golden rule. Some look at me and have no idea what I'm saying. Yet others will say a mixed up version of that rule. And I say, no, this doesn't mean treat others the way they treat you. That's what most people think. But to treat others the way you want to be treated, there is a difference. To be named as the 2016 Georgia Teacher of the Year is, I will tell you, completely overwhelming. Am I the best teacher? No. There are many teachers who have a lot more experience and education than I have. I know that. However, I take it as an honor to have the opportunity to represent Georgia teachers. What I have to offer is a sense of duty, a love of the student, and an obligation to be in relationship with all of my students and their parents, to be in relationship with faculty and my administration, and to take the role as school teacher as an honor to positively impact the future. The two students I spoke about, I wish I had happy endings to both stories, but I don't. The student with the electronic monitoring bracelet, like I said, went off campus and robbed another student at gunpoint. He never came back to school. I don't know how the story ends. But for 6 weeks, he chose to come to my American government and civics class every day for 6 weeks. For 6 weeks, we were in relationship, and he taught me how to love someone who appeared at first to be unlovable. And I'm grateful for that experience. I planted some seeds. The other student with the panic attacks, well, he graduated with honors this past May. He was interviewed by Harvard, Dartmouth, Amherst, and Emory. He had full scholarship offers from several of these universities, and I'm proud to say that he will start at Emory this fall. What if I had not stopped to look below the waterline, to see the depths in these two students? It may have had a different outcome. It's all about building relationship, and it's also all about planting seeds. My question for you is, what can you do to make a difference in the life of another? The simple gesture of a smile, a hello, or an acknowledgement can make a difference in someone's life, and you know what? You may never know it. In closing, I challenge you to think about this. Who have you personally impacted today? Not yesterday, not last week, not 10 years ago, but today. What have you said to encourage those around you? What have you done to build a meaningful relationship, and not just with the people that you like? That's easy. But building relationship with the seemingly unlikable. You know, the people that appeared to be hard to love. The people that get under your crawl. We've all had people like that in our life. I know I do. But if you stop, ask questions, and listen, you may be surprised to find a scared little girl who needs to be understood, or is just fearful of life. You may find an anxious boy who has a fear that causes him to act in a certain destructive way, or a boy who's very angry at the hand the world has dealt him, even though that little boy may be 50 years old. Yes, they may look like an adult, but deep down they're still frightened children. You may find someone who may drink or take illegal drugs to ease life's pain, one who is over their head in debt, or hurting at the loss of a loved one who has died, or someone who's experiencing a broken relationship, or somebody that has no meaningful relationships. This is no different from one of my students who needs my attention. They're going to get it in a positive way, or they're going to get it in a negative way, but they will get my attention. Remember, it's all about relationship. You can be the change agent. You can change your attitude. You can make a difference in someone's life today. Today as you leave, I challenge you to truly love God and love your neighbor. It's not easy, but you know, it's all about the relationship. Amen and amen.